Hello and welcome to the AUA Focus Series, a podcast channel by the AUA Media Lab. My name is Ani Asatryan and I'm a third-year business student at the American University of Armenia. And today I'll be speaking with Mr. John Allelo, who is the Mission Director of USAID Armenia. Thank you so much for coming on today. I'm very excited to actually be the first student to be hosting the podcast, and I'm honored to have you as our guest. I think that we'll have a very insightful conversation today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm so happy to be here as well. I've been to the center, but it's the first time I actually get to participate in a project here. So
thank you too.
Happy to be here.
So today we'll be talking about USAID's mission globally, and then everything that it has done for the development of Armenia, and then specifically about AUA. So without further ado, I guess we should start with my first question.
Okay.
So USAID has a global mission to promote the sustainable development and also improve lives. How do you think USAID ensures its global mission remains relevant and impactful in different countries, considering how fast and rapid the world keeps changing?
No, a great question. And key points that you made, different countries, changing world. So we do a basic 5-year strategy for each country. The problem, of course, is things change in that 5-year window. So what we do is when we sit down with the government, we agree on sort of the priorities that go into that strategy. But then when we design programs, we make sure that those programs have flexibilities built in so that we can adjust for unexpected changes. As an example, in Armenia, we had projects in place, but we were able to flex those projects to do work that was responsive to the NK influx and work with some of the displaced. So to be relevant, you have to be current, right? And you have to be able to respond to the realities at any given time. So that's one of the things that's important for us to always consider, not just what we want to happen, but also what could happen and preparing for that.
So you design a strategy in advance just in case if anything happens, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So we have, as I said, a basic strategy that we agree on with the government and civil society as far as where can we be helpful in Armenia or in whichever country. And then we begin our projects and our designs to fulfill those goals. But in each case, we want to be flexible.
Okay, so you mentioned specifically Armenia, and I wanted to ask, can you give us like a brief overview of USAID's portfolio in Armenia, specifically talking about the key sector where USAID focuses its efforts on?
So it's unique in Armenia in that we really do participate in a number of different areas. So, for example, we currently have 33 different programs in place on the ground, and they are in all 10 Marzas and Yerevan, as well as almost every sector you might imagine, to some extent. And so when we make the strategic plan, we're looking at a high level. So we're basically focusing on 2 principal areas of support. In Armenia, democracy and governance is one area, and economic growth and development is the other. And then we build programs under each of those categories. And as I said, so we have 33 different programs right now that pick a sector, focus on democracy, focus on institution building, focus on education, focus on economic growth, on workforce development, on youth outreach, on vulnerable populations. And then the goal is that when you look at all of those programs holistically, we help the government fill necessary needs and gaps as it proceeds, the development process. Currently, the portfolio that we have is about $230 million in current active programming.
Okay. So when you say that you make sure that at the end result, they align with the country's development needs, right at the beginning when designing the strategies, do you firstly talk with the government to understand what the needs are, or do you conduct your own research as well to make sure you make the right decision?
We do both. So USAID operates with a couple of basic principles. One, do no harm. So we want to make sure that the work we do is helpful, is constructive, and not disruptive or destructive. Secondly, we also believe very strongly in the principle of nothing about us without us. So that is, if we're going to do a program that really works with youth, for example, then we want to talk to the youth. I mean, I am not one to dictate what youth want today, but you are. And so I'd want to know what your thoughts are and what do you think the priorities should be? So we work with the government, and the government here has a very strong reform agenda. So that reform agenda is sort of a basic outline of where we can be helpful. Then once we use that sort of agenda, then we start to design programs, and depending on the program or the objective, we engage not only the government, but our colleagues, civil society, academia. We also do assessments to understand the landscape so that the programs, as we ultimately design and implement them, actually are helpful and effective.
Okay. So you mentioned some of the institutions that are a part of the portfolio in Armenia, and AUA being one of the institutions that are like about a part of the key initiatives. What would you say has been the significance of the partnership of USAID and AUA, and how do you envision the role of institutions like AUA in advancing Armenia's development goals?
That's a great question. Let's talk a little bit about sort of AUA. Initially, one of the things that we always consider is what is the long-term impact of the work we do today? And part of that is, a consideration of how do you accomplish that impact? And one of the key ways to do that is you work with the citizens, with civil society, with young people, those people who are invested in the future of their own country and the future in their own futures have very strong opinions about what can be done, what should be done, what might be done. And we want to actually utilize that relationship. So when you have AUA is not just an academic institution. It truly is an icon for change. It's the nature of an academic institution, the nature of a university, the nature of this university, where we can access the thoughts and the ideas and the innovation that comes from the student body. Like today, we're able to come in and chat about what are the things you're interested in. That is critically important for us to know and to understand, or worse, if we don't understand, to have the ability to ask you to clarify. So AUA serves as sort of that incubator in many ways, as do other universities and other institutions. It just creates an opportunity for us to have a conversation. And through that conversation, we can come up with plans and ideas and thoughts, concepts of things that we may do today, tomorrow, or next week. But it's a conversation that begins and continues.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I wanted to bring the same example, even though it's just a university, AUA is just a university. If it was solely for the academic purposes, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation right now. So going back to the impactful projects that USAID has done for the development of Armenia, could you highlight like one or two that you believe had the most significant long-term impact on the country?
Wow, it's a hard question because I really am very, very proud of a lot of the work we've done. And I can give you snippets and examples of things. Let me focus on maybe two areas that I think are most notable, about which I'm most proud. In 2017, there were 8 social workers in the entire country. So we created a program called the Community Level Access to Social Services, or the CLASS program. And that program was created, the sole intent was to create the profession of social workers. So we then worked with civil society, worked with the universities, and developed the social worker network, and have gone from 8 social workers to now about 150. And we have a curricula that's in place at Yerevan State University to train and educate and continuing education for social workers. Now, that when you step back and you understand why that's important, it's just incredibly impressive. These are the people who were on the front line during the war in 2020, during COVID. These are the people who went out to villages where no one else would go and help, develop programs to provide for the needs of those people. They were there who stayed in cities that were being evacuated during the conflict to make sure everybody was getting out safely. These are the people who really identified not only who were the most vulnerable, but what are the needs of those people and how do we address them? And it's this incredibly now powerful network of individuals who really do represent all of the good of Armenia, all of the hospitality of Armenia in a way that helps protect the future of Armenia. So I'm very, very proud of that program. Another program, one that you would be somewhat familiar with perhaps, is sort of our work with media. One of the things that is so critically important in this globalized world, you mentioned at the top how quickly the world is changing. What's so important is you have to have the knowledge of what's changing to know how to best react to it. Yeah. So we've worked in a number of sectors that support sort of media literacy, media capacity, university education for media, for journalists, in a means to try to ensure that citizens get accurate, timely, useful information so that they can then make decisions. And that's across the board. That's students, that's your parents, that's faculty, that's the government. Everyone needs to have access to timely and accurate information in a way that they can use that to plan. There's a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of disinformation. Social media has a way of sort of conflating ideas and issues in a way that are not always helpful. So one of the areas we thought was very important is just helping people get the information they need. And we're lucky that we've been able to partner with with AUA and the public affairs section at the embassy to not only develop media awareness here, but to develop a master's program for journalists, which is critically important. And then our media program also works with media institutions, media organizations, to try to help them build sustainability and self-sufficiency so they can continue to operate. And then you bring all of this together, and then you are able to get useful information as you plan your day.
Yeah, I think that concept is too important in this day and age, because not only is the world changing rapidly, but social media is becoming more and more popular, and especially with the younger generation, they're being impacted by the information that they receive. So media literacy is definitely one of the key points that needs to be worked on, and it's great that it's one of your projects.
Well, and your point is so important. The world moves at such a pace. Whether we want it to or not, we are all expected to do things very, very quickly. Yeah. So by default, we often get bits and pieces of information, and we have to run with that information. And if later we find out that that was not accurate, or that was somebody's opinion on Facebook, or that was something that was said on Instagram without legitimacy, but yet we've made decisions based on it, it creates challenges that we then have to address. Yeah. So your point's absolutely right, that we've got to keep up with technology in a way that allows us to sort of keep up with the world as it changes.
As much as possible.
As much as possible.
So you mentioned the development of youth and the importance of youth for your project. So how does USAID's work support the young people of Armenia specifically and empower them to take leadership roles and contribute to the country's future goals?
In many ways, it's very selfish that because we actually use youth to make our planning. And so, yes, hopefully our programs, support youth initiatives, and we do not design any program that does not factor in youth in a broad sense, because it goes back to the point we've talked about, that youth have a perspective not only on today, but they have a perspective about what will happen tomorrow that's very, very special and very important and very different than what my perspective may be. So we try to engage as many people from differing backgrounds, differing locations. I mean, we don't just go to AUA and get the people who were born and raised in Yerevan, but we actually go out and try to talk to people in different parts of the country, and talk to diaspora and talk to students to get perspective. And it also is very important as we talk about sort of nothing about us without us, because if we are doing program where the youth are actually the beneficiaries of the program, and we do that through some workforce development programs, some media programs, that we also want to make sure that what we're offering youth as beneficiaries of programs is useful to them, because otherwise it's a waste of time and money. So we learn from you as we try to decide how we can help you. So it's a very cyclical conversation. But the point is, as you pointed out earlier, it's a conversation. It's an ongoing conversation that adjusts and adapts as circumstances change. So we take great pride in talking with not only with youth, but also other vulnerable populations, certainly women and girls, to get the differing perspectives so that we can try to be as broad and beneficial to as many people as we can through our programs.
Isn't it hard to work with all those different perspectives? I mean, it's good that you consider everyone's perspective, but how do you kind of make sure that everyone's perspective is taken into account?
It is hard, but it is the world in which we live, right? It's, you go talk to a student body here, it's a mixture of people, a mixture of personalities, a mixture of backgrounds, and you're trying to either share with them information or glean from them information or persuade them to do something or not do something. It's just that's a microcosm of a much bigger discussion. But you have to understand as a first step that people can be different. And opinions will be different. And you can't necessarily please everyone with every decision, but you can be at least as thoughtful as possible in making decisions that will at least benefit as many people as possible. And one of the things that we are open to is sort of pushback. We at USAID have this idea that we're not afraid to fail. I mean, we will try programs and some of them don't work. Some of them, the beneficiaries are like, that's not what we want. That's not what we meant. So we will pull those programs back, redesign those programs in a way to try to be more effective and more efficient in the implementation. So it is hard to try to accommodate everybody. But you realize early on that you're not going to accommodate everyone. But you want everyone to understand that their opinion is important. And you're willing to hear that opinion. And it factors into the bigger discussion.
Yeah, definitely. Even if the thing that they wanted doesn't happen in the end, if they know that their voice is heard, it's already a great step and a big step.
Well, and sometimes voice is heard today, but it's not actually processed until later. Because oftentimes we're talking to people and they're saying, oh, well, if we only could do this, this, and this. And that is impossible to do right now. But in another program, we're like, wait a minute, Ani was talking about doing this. That would fit very nicely in this program. So things then come back into the discussion. And again, it's part of that whole evolution of programming and trying to be relevant and responsive as times and circumstances change.
Yeah, definitely. I want to reflect a bit on your time in Armenia. What would you say are the key takeaways from your time here?
That I could answer that question on many levels. Let me say this. I have been in Armenia now 3.5 years. It is an amazing place for a lot of reasons. But the one thing I think that I would say, or the things that I think I would say that stand out to me every time I have this conversation really are the people. The resiliency of the Armenian people, the optimism of the Armenian people, the willingness of the Armenian people to continue to move forward. As you know, I mean, the last few years have been challenging, and yet no one has given up. This country has continued to move forward. The government has continued to adjust programs to try to accommodate shifting needs and developments. And it is astonishing because I know people in other parts of the world who just wouldn't know what to do. And in Armenia, it's not only that people, I guess it's one of the key things is that Armenians are problem solvers. no one is afraid of a problem. And I think that's one of the reasons that certain sectors, like the IT sector, is doing so well. You throw a problem out and somebody's going to figure out what to do with it, as opposed to many places where people are like, well, I'm not sure how to handle this. In Armenia, it's almost like a challenge. Like you dare me to figure this out, I will figure this out. And that's an amazing trait. And I think that will bode very, very well for Armenia in the long run. And I think it's a wonderful trait for students to start to develop as you study and you start to sort of decide what you want to do with your life. That ability to assess and respond and adjust is very, very important. And one of the things that's really, really important about a school like AUA is the education in critical analysis and how do you really analyze a problem so that you can address it most effectively as quickly as possible is a great match for that Armenian resiliency.
Yeah, I would say both the resilience and kind of the problem-solving expertise comes from the people as well and the community in which people are a part of, because even our small community here at AUA, it really does feel like we're a family here. And when the people around you are that close to you, even if they're strangers, it kind of promotes you wanting to do something better for your country and trying to make the lives of them better, even though they're just strangers. And I think that's one of the key characteristics of Armenians.
It is. And I think one of the things that touches my heart every time is whenever you're at dinner and that first toast is made to the people here.
Yeah.
And the beauty of friendship and how it is evolved and how quickly Armenians adapt and embrace new people is a wonderful, wonderful trait.
Yeah. What would you say has been the thing that left the most long-lasting impression on you, whether it be professionally or personally?
I think it's a combination of things. I think much of it is what we've just talked about. It's how difficult the world may be, but yet how people don't give up, how people are willing to adapt. It's the idea of understanding what your options are and embracing those options in a way that will benefit you and your community. It is the idea that you just mentioned of community, and it's this ability of Armenians to superimpose all these different communities over each other into one sort of very, very broad, very, very loving community. Whether it's your school community or your family or your neighborhood or, friends from wherever or summer camp, people respect those groups and those communities in a way that once you're part of that, you're always part of that. And it builds and it creates that network. And the networking aspect is unbelievable. I've worked in many countries where they're diaspora, and there are people who live all over the world, and they may send remittances back to the home country. Nowhere else but Armenia do you see the amount of interest from diaspora, not only in just sending money back, but actually investing in the country, following the country, coming back and forth. People who, like you, lived abroad and have come home and developed a life here. That is a very unique sort of role that diaspora play, again, to continue to influence what Armenia is and what Armenia will become, because they are having different life experiences outside of the country that they then bring in and contribute to the country. Yeah. And that's an amazing, amazing opportunity to learn and to grow.
Yeah, I would agree. I know we're going kind of back and forth, but what advice would you offer to young students like me here at AUA as we prepare to become the new generation of leaders in Armenia?
First, I would say you are not preparing to become the new generation of leaders. You already are the new generation of leaders, which is key, because I think the one thing I would say, if if I were talking to myself 20 years ago and giving myself advice, what would I have said to me is what I will say. I will say you are a generation that is informed, that is aware, that cares, and is concerned. Choose your own path and be passionate about that choice. You know, in my day, people chose our paths for us and sort of pushed us along to become what, you know, our parents wanted us to be or what have you. I think today you have so many more opportunities. And so the advice I would give you would be decide what your passion is. You know, there's that old saying in the US that if you make money in your passion, you never have to work a day in your life.
Yeah.
And it's true. And if you can identify sort of what your path is and follow it and be true to it, you will be so much more effective and so much happier than if you let other people dictate. Now, I'm not saying don't take advice, don't ask questions, don't accept counsel. Absolutely, you should do that. But ultimately, you should be your own guide and know where you're going. And then you also can have the ability to adjust and adapt as the world changes or as you run into different challenges, because then it's your life. Yeah. And it's not a life you're living for other people. And I think that goal of holding on to your own future as how you invest in what you will become will be a great guide for you as you move forward.
Thank you so much for that advice. It was really motivating for me specifically because you say we should follow our passion, and sometimes it feels like the options are endless and it's difficult to choose. But I think it's very important to understand what we specifically want. And you mentioned that, so it was great to hear like the reassurance I needed. That was the last question that I had. I think I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, I guess that's it.
Thank you very much. And
Thank you too.
I appreciate you making time to have this conversation. You know, again, for me, it's a great pleasure and a great honor to be able to talk to people sort of about what's important to you, because that influences so much of what's important to us.
Of course, yeah.
So thank you for making time. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for letting me come to the Media Center and use your equipment.
Thank you too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.